I know, right? You never thought you'd see the Reluctant Gringo live. Well, here I am. I am live here with you doing a reaction video to a story that I had to comment on for a bunch of different reasons, and we'll get into that. And it is because one of my most popular videos on the channel was about canceling Disney Plus and why I felt that way because of Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar and all the things and all the woke stuff going on and the direction that the company's going with the entertainment and the message getting political. It just really turned me off. But now this story has come out, and I think it came out yesterday. I know you can see it on CNBC here, that Apple is possibly going to buy Disney. Now, I know we've heard it before, and we've heard it last year. We heard it a few months ago. The stock for Disney has dropped to about $80 a share, and it's one of the worst levels it's ever been at since like 2014 or since 2012 or whatever, but it's been a long time. So they've lost a lot of money. So they're ripe for a takeover, right? Especially by a company that has so much cash reserves like Apple. But is that really the fairy tale ending we want for Disney? Maybe it's what Bob Iger wants because he's set to make so much money that he can just make his war chest, and he's probably going to run for president one day. Who knows? The guy's ego's out of control. He's just not good at being a CEO. But do you know who is really good at being a CEO? Tim Cook. Look, love Apple, hate Apple, however you might feel about it. You cannot sit there and tell me that Tim Cook is not one of the premier CEOs on the planet. He took over that company from Steve Jobs and grew it into what it is today. Now, I'm not saying you should love iPhones. I use iPhones, let's just talk about, I use iPhones, I use Macs. And another reason that you might want to listen to my opinion on this is that I also used to work for Apple for about 10 years. So I kind of know what I'm talking about when I talk about the company that is Apple. And so when I think about Apple buying Disney, and I think about where Disney is and what Disney's done to the fandoms of Star Wars and Marvel and everything else, and the messages and the political bullcrap and the woke nonsense and all of that, guess what? Apple buying Disney is not going to make that just go away. It's not going to happen. In fact, it's only going to increase it because Apple is one of the most woke companies on the planet. Now, you may not have thought of that because you don't work there. You may not have thought of that because they don't advertise it the way Disney does, the way Amazon does, Best Buy, other companies out there, or other entertainment industry companies like Warner Brothers, Paramount, things like that, right? But they are. And all you have to do is look at some of the content they have on Apple TV Plus, and you can see where they've gender swapped, race swapped, all that, right? And so what we see at Disney going on right now will continue to go on at an even greater level with Apple. All right? Apple buying Disney is not going to be the answer to the prayers of the fans. It will probably be the final nail in the coffin of the fandoms that really truly cared about these intellectual properties, that really truly cared about the legacy characters, that really truly cared to go out and spend their hard-earned money on seeing the movies, buying the books, buying the toys, buying the merchandise, going to the parks, right? So does it make sense that Apple is going to buy Disney financially? Well, yes and no. But here's the thing. Apple doesn't like to do things that isn't in its DNA. Right? I hear that a lot. I heard that a lot for 10 years. Talked about what was in Apple's DNA as an employee of Apple. What was in their DNA? Music, entertainment, great products that help people do things in life and make their life easier, right? Connect people. What's in their DNA? Theme parks are not in the DNA. So Apple buying Disney theme parks? No, that's not going to happen. Right? I can't see that happen. I can't see Tim Cook saying, we're going to spend all this money that we put aside on theme parks. That's not in Apple's DNA. What is in Apple's DNA is content, entertainment. That is at the core of their DNA. It started out with music, then it moved to Apple TV Plus. So now they need content. They have a streaming service. They want to compete. How do you compete? Well, they have the ability to put product out. Now they just need to actually have product. So, you're a new streaming service, or relatively new streaming service. You've won an Oscar. Now you want content to really draw those people in and become one of the big players. Star Wars, Marvel, all the Fox properties, right? All that stuff. Pixar. Now we're going to get to Pixar in a second, because let me tell you something. If you don't think Apple wants Pixar real bad, as just alone, if they could just get Pixar by themselves, you are sadly mistaken, and you do not know Apple, and you've never actually spent some time inside of Apple, because the cult of Apple, they want Pixar back, believe me. And when I say that, I'll explain in a second. But anyways, so Apple TV Plus needs content. For a streaming service to survive, it needs content that people want. Well, people want Star Wars. People want Marvel. Maybe not right now, but we're all, as fans, hoping that, it's going to happen. They've already, gotten some MLB. There's some talk about them getting some NFL. So they got soccer. So there's all this sports going in. So ESPN makes sense for Apple. If they could get a hold of Hulu, that makes sense for Apple, because then they got the TV series and all that stuff. So the benefits for the streaming service of Apple TV Plus, taking all those properties and just having them in their hands to offer on their platform. The financial benefit, I'm sure, like I said, Tim Cook is not a dummy. He is not a dummy. He does really smart things. He makes really smart business decisions. He's an operational guy, right? Steve Jobs was a visionary, right? Steve Jobs, again, we can do whole videos on Steve Jobs, but Steve Jobs, he was a visionary. He wasn't an operational guy. Tim Cook is operational, right? So he learned under, the branches, under the tree of Steve Jobs. So he kind of understood the whole idea of being visionary, right? And he's trying to, do his thing that way. But really the core of Tim Cook is operationally, he's sound when it comes to logistics, when it comes to operating budgets, when it comes to making strategic maneuvers within the business, within the stocks, what's best for the company. There's really very few people on the planet that can hold a candle to Tim Cook. So he's going to do what's right. So I can see him going to Disney, going to Bob Iger and saying, look, this is what we're interested in over here. We're not interested in these theme parks over here. We don't want to run theme parks. No. Get those out of here. We don't want theme parks. But they want that content. They want that media. Now let's talk about Pixar for a second. I mean, we all know who originally helped start Pixar or started Pixar. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs helped start Pixar. He was the head of Pixar. They bought Pixar from Steve Jobs. Disney acquired it, right? Now, if you know anything about working in Apple or about the cult of Apple, Steve Jobs he's godlike. I mean, godlike to the point where I have met people in Apple. Most people whose first names are Steve that I've met in Apple refuse to use their first name because they don't want to be called Steve, because it makes them feel awkward, like they're taking away from Steve's legacy. Right? Because that's how we all refer. No one calls him Steve Jobs. Everybody at Apple, we called him Steve. And when we said the name Steve, everybody knows who we're talking about. Just like when we say the name Tim, everybody knows who we're talking about at Apple. So the cult of Steve Jobs is very, very real. Right? And when I say don't use first names, I'm serious about this. You would go into the company directory and say the person's name was Steve Smith. Well, they would get rid of the Steve and they would just use their last name twice. So then it would say in the Apple directory, Smith, Smith. And that's how you'd refer to him. Smith, Smith, Jones, Jones. If your name was Steve Johnson, your name was Johnson, Johnson. And you did that voluntarily. No one forced you to do it. You just, as you were sucked into the cult of Steve Jobs and sucked into the cult of Apple, it just felt natural just that to do that, to not use the name Steve because it was so revered. It was like calling yourself Jesus. And no one wanted to call themselves Jesus, right? Without looking crazy. So the cult of Steve Jobs is very real. And the idea of Apple getting back one of the primary inventions, legacies of Steve Jobs, getting it back and saying it's home again. And that's Pixar. That's tempting. That's got to be so tempting, so real, so enough for them to want enough for Apple to want to make a multi-billion-dollar offer on the properties and intellectual properties that Disney has. So I can see that happening. Again, the theme park thing, no, Disney's going to be stuck with the theme parks. That's their thing. They're going to have to figure out how to fix that and all that and get people back in and, get the princesses looking like princesses. I remember when I went to Disney World with my kids, the princesses looked like princesses. Call me old-fashioned. I liked it that way, right? The princes look like Prince. Call me old-fashioned. I liked it that way, right? Now, they've got to fix that, right? And that's a whole argument for another day. But as far as this article from CNBC about Apple buying Disney, yes, it could happen, but it's not the answer to all the prayers of the fans who want that wokeness to go away. Because within Apple, you have huge amounts of wokeness. It is woke capital. And again, I worked there. When BLM was a thing, we were all given shirts. Hey, you're going to wear your BLM shirt today. Really wasn't a choice. You're wearing your BLM shirt today. I don't want to wear a BLM shirt. I mean, I agree racism is bad and all that, right? Like we can all agree on that, but I don't want to promote that group, right? When it comes to Pride Month, you're giving your little pins and your stickers and your ribbons that you're encouraged to wear. Because if you don't wear them, then you start getting the awkward questions. Did you get your pins? Did you get your whole package? Did you forget them at home? Did you not want to wear them? Do you want to talk about it? And no, I just don't want to wear the ribbons. I have no problem with someone being homosexual. I have no problem with someone being transgender. I don't want to, it's just not something I promote. I don't promote it, just like I don't promote my lifestyle, right? So it's extremely woke. You go through the unconscious bias training every 6 to 8 months. You go through the struggle sessions where you sit there and you have to be on Zoom calls and listen to people tell you how bad this country is and how bad of a time they have it and how somehow you're at fault, right? You go through these things. Every month, you, as an employee, you go through some sort of training when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. I did love working for the company. I don't want to say anything like that. Listen, that company's done a lot of great things. And I don't want to sit there and say this is the totality of it, but it is part of it. It is there. So when I think of Apple buying Disney and the idea of the wokeness going away, no, it's the exact opposite. So is it, as the CNBC article says, is it a fairy tale ending? No. For regular fans, for fans like me, and probably fans like you, it's not a fairy tale. It's going to be a nightmare, and it's going to be hard to watch if it happens. We'll have to see. We can only can control what we can control, and we can't control this. So with that, hope you enjoyed this. This has been fun doing my first reaction video. I'll try to do more of these. Again, I wear my mask. I have different masks because I am the reluctant gringo, and I am south of the border. And from south of the border, from me to all of you, salud and a huevo.